8-1, Graphing Linear Equations. We are going to start with talking about the rate of change. I'm going to be using the symbol capital R for the rate of change. And a rate of change is simply the change, so that this triangle means change, the change in the output divided by the change in the input. So let's look at example 1. So if you take a look, page 295, example 1, the input for this is the number of lawns that are mowed, and the output is going to be the money earned. Okay, so Eve is the one who's keeping track of this, and so if she wants to figure out her rate of change between any 2 days, what she does is figures out her change in her output and divides that by her change in her input. So between days 1 and 2, when you look on the graph, day 2, her amount earned, her output was 45. Day 1, her amount earned was 15. Her input on day 1 or day 2 was 3 lawns that she mowed, and her input on day 1 was 1 lawn that she mowed. So when you find the change of that, that becomes 30 over 20, and it becomes a $15 per lawn rate. There's always going to be a unit on the bottom and a unit on the top for a rate. Okay, so that's per lawn mowed. All right, so if we look at the next day, her day 2 to day 3, her output for day 3 was 90. Output for day 2 is 45. So 90 minus 45 is 45. Input for day 3 was 6 lawns she mowed. Input for day 2 was 3 lawns that she mowed. So her input was 3. And so she has 45 over 3, which means that she has a rate of $15 per lawn. So you can do this again with day 3 to 4, going 120 to 90, 8 and 6. And so that gives us yet again the same rate. And so day 4 to 5, she has 195 to 120, 13 minus 8. All right, so these are, and I'm getting these numbers. All of these numbers are coming from that table. So you're going to want to take a look in your book. And so this is equal to 75 over 5, which when you divide is 15. Now what you notice, or should notice, is that no matter which interval I chose, we ended up with a constant rate. Now this is how you figure out the rate from a table. But our next example is figuring out the rate from a graph. Now I've gone a little bit different than your book. So hopefully if you have questions on how to fill in those notes, come see me. But from a graph, it's actually a little bit easier. So we have this graph, and this graph is showing some type of relationship between our x variable and our y variable. And on a graph, the rate of change is going to be equal to the slope. Okay, so the slope, as you'll remember, is just how steep this line is. So to figure out the rate of change or the slope from a line, you first pick any 2 points. So right here, I've just picked 2 points. I picked this one here, which is 2, 3, and this one here, which is 4, 6. And then you're going to find your change. Remember whenever I write that little triangle there, that means change. You're going to find your change in y, and you're going to divide that by your change in x. So for these 2 points, my change in y is going to be my second y minus my first y. And my change in x is going to be my second x minus my first x. Now, this is important. You need whichever x and y you call 1 and 2, you always need the second one minus the first one. Don't do the second y minus the first y and then flip the x's, because that'll mess you up. So for here, I've chosen my 4, 6 to be my 2. And so my y's, I have 6 minus 3, because that's my first y. And then I have 4, which is my second x, minus 2 on the bottom. So that means that my rate or slope of this line is 3 over 2. Now, your book talks about, making a unit rate. Well, this is not a unit rate. To make a unit rate, the bottom number has to be 1. So how can we make this bottom number 1? Remember, when we're dealing with fractions, if I want to make the number on the bottom 1, I can divide that by whatever number, and so I divide the top number by the same. So if I start with 3 over 2 and I divide 2 by 2, that's 1. If I divide 3 by 2, I get 1.5. So the unit rate here for this graph that I'm showing is 1.5 over 3. Oops, sorry, 1.5 over 1. Now, on a graph, if it is a straight line, it has a constant slope. If it has a constant slope, it has a constant rate of change. So that's what I mean when I say that a graph is a little bit easier to deal with, because if you just look at it, if it's a straight line, you know you have a constant rate of change. When you're dealing with a table, you have to do all of those calculations just like before. All right, well, good luck, and ask me if you have questions.